I just wanted to close with an ask, but to couch the ask in a story of a personal experience that I had that essentially brings me here to this dean's gig. I am beginning my third academic year as dean here at the Graduate Policy School. I am not doing a single thing I thought I'd be doing 10 years ago. I'm sure the students here really love to hear that. But to make a very long and very painful story as short as I can, about 10 years ago, I was heading up a bipartisan nonprofit called Common Sense California. I mentioned that before. And the intent of Common Sense California was to engage Californians in policymaking. We learned very early on after a $4 million failure, that I'm happy to talk about over beers, because that's what it'll take for me to get through the story, that really it was almost impossible to support intentional, informed, legitimate public engagement work at the state level in a state the size of California. But what I did learn through a group of local leaders, through a retreat that we convened after this $4 million failure, was that the public engagement work that I cared deeply about could actually happen at the local level. And that led to a complete sea change in the mission of this 501c3. We had gotten some funding from the Hewlett Foundation. I'm now thinking back on 2008. And we created a grant, what we called the Common Sense Grant Program. And we essentially became a grant maker to cities and counties, offering grants to support public engagement at the local level. And so that monies would be used to hire facilitators or to bring in outside consultants or create websites that had some sort of participatory element in them. And what we learned through the first year of the grant program is that as much as I cared about public engagement, we thought we really outlined the specifics of what qualified for a grant. Most of the people in local government really didn't know what public engagement was. They knew that they wanted certain policies passed and they were willing to convene the public, but usually the process was something like, I'm the government official, you're the public, this is my brilliant idea, this is why you need to support it. And what I learned then was that there was another way of thinking about leadership in which there was a better way of engaging residents in policy making that could actually be informed by gathering the public together. And so out of that grant program morphed into a training program. And we created a suite of training programs from webinars to multi-day, now professional certificates. We've trained over 2,500 local government officials in the last 7 years in how to better lead an effective public process that doesn't look like one of those meltdown town hall meetings that we often see on television. And in creating the training really started to take off so quickly that this Common Sense California, the board of that nonprofit said, you know, if we want to really increase the legitimacy and impact of this training, we really should find an academic partner to do this. And that led me to a series of conversations with 3 different graduate policy schools here in California to essentially embed the training and consulting work that we were doing at a graduate policy school. And without getting into all the reasons, what we found in first speaking with a large public institution and then second a large private institution is that Pepperdine, I found, was very entrepreneurial and moved a lot quicker than those other 2 institutions and thought a lot more creatively about how you could morph a 501c3 into creating an academic institute. And so 7.5 years ago, something called the Davenport Institute for Public Engagement was launched here at Pepperdine School of Public Policy, and I was its first executive director. And really for the better part of the last 6 or 7 years, we have been an academic institute that has continued training and consulting with government officials in how to do something that really they never get taught in most policy programs. Because one of the catchphrases that we use around here is that we're about putting the public back into public policy. And unfortunately, a lot of graduate policy programs, that's not really their way of thinking. And so when my dear friend Dave Smith approached me about a year ago, he didn't approach me, we were just having a conversation. I wouldn't want to say that he approached me. Dave was on my board at Common Sense California and saw the transition that we went from a 501c3 to an academic institute. And as he was heading up at the time this Presidio Institute, we began looking at the prospect of would it be possible, or how would it happen that we would transition this cross-sector work into an academic institute, and what would it look like? And so what I want to do is just quickly propose to you, we've already got some ideas on the table, and there are going to be some in the pieces of paper, the forms that you have to fill out. But the format of programs that we created for the Institute that I foresee happening here in what is now called the Project for Cross-Sector Leadership here at the Graduate Policy School is that we were involved in three things at Davenport that I think naturally map to what could be possible here at the project. One, there need to be more educational programs both inside of this Master's in Public Policy program, but outside, engaging with people who are wanting to know more about how you do this work. What does that look like? Could it be professional certificates? Could it be online education? Could it be degree programs? Could it be webinars? All those things to me are on the table. We're experienced in developing those kinds of educational programming through the Davenport Institute for Government. I think that there is space here to do that. Second, what we did at the Davenport Institute is, as we were consulting on more and more projects, we were beyond our scale of being able to respond to all the calls we were getting from cities, special districts, counties, and the state to say, hey, we've got a problem, we know we need to engage the public, we don't know how to do it. Do you have a facilitator that's got subject matter expertise in planning, or in a public safety issue, or in a budget issue? And we would say, yes. We've actually built a network of what has now got to be somewhere around 40 to 50 facilitators. So when a city or municipality or government agency calls us to say, could you help us with this really difficult budget issue, or there's just been an issue around education that we're looking to engage the public on, can you help us? We say absolutely, and in a non-financially remunerative way, we essentially play the role as a matchmaker between subject matter consultants and those municipalities. I think there are consultants in this room right now, and even the people that aren't technically consultants, who may be doing full-time work in another space, who may be familiar with this, who may be a lot of our panelists and some of you, we want to be that connecting point between you and those opportunities. So that's the second thing, consultants. And third, we want to be, and it starts with that brochure that Lenny noted that is in your packets. That is just the beginning of what I hope become hundreds of case studies. So if you go on the Davenport Institute website today and you're saying, well, I don't even know what public engagement looks like. All I know is really boring public comment meetings and meltdowns and Parks and Rec and House of Cards, all those really bad examples. What does it look like? Well, you can go on the website, you can find out in very easy kind of one-pagers what a good public process looks like. And I believe that we should be doing the same thing here. Now, we are not going to be a major research institution into this. That is not going to be our role. What we do real good is we teach leadership. And what we also do real good is we are very entrepreneurial in the creation of educational products and programs. So I understand that while we are certainly the most beautiful campus in America, and definitely the most beautiful campus in Southern California, that we also happen to be in a space where there are other major policy schools. And I have a lot of friends that teach in those places and are deans of those places. And I want them to keep doing exactly what they are made to do. I know what we do well is that I think we can move very quickly and we can be very responsive to those who come to us with really good ideas that you would like to put through an educational institution. And so, having gone through the experience of approaching other educational institutions with a really good institute idea that just never went anywhere, and then as soon as we started our conversations here at Pepperdine, things really took off, the same thing's gonna happen here. And so as I said at the very beginning, I wanna get your fingerprints on this, and I just want you to know that I am personally committed to this, not just because I think this is a market differentiator for us as a policy school, and I want us to be known as a school that cares deeply about this. As I put in the letter on the inside of that brochure, I believe this is the new old form of American public leadership. That is what this is. There's something genuinely American about cross-sector leadership. And it's something that we've lost for a whole variety of reasons, a lot of the reasons we've heard actually in our conversations today. And, but it's something that needs to be reclaimed. And I think that this is the kind of place that can reclaim it. You know, Pepperdine is named for a guy named George Pepperdine. I don't know if you know the George Pepperdine story. Founded a company called Western Auto Parts, which was essentially a mail order catalog for auto parts. And back in 1938, Pepperdine is having its 80th anniversary year now. He thought that Pepperdine and Los Angeles specifically needed a school that prepared citizens. And to me, that has always been what this policy school has been about, is about how do we prepare public leaders. And I think that this way of understanding public leadership, building on my experience in kind of creating the Davenport Institute and how we better build the bridge between our governing institutions and our citizens, but also, as we see today, between the different sectors, is what we're going to be known for here. And I desperately want your help in accomplishing this. Because I think as we've seen on many of the panels today, this really is a leadership skill. It's not just looking at something and saying, wow, you know, that's really great that they did that. Well, if we're gonna solve so many of the public problems that we have, it's going to demand these kinds of relationships and this view of leadership. And so with that, I'm going to ask in public here for any thoughts that you might have that if this were your project on cross-sector leadership, what are the things that you think I should be considering as dean? And then as this continues, and I appreciate Morgan's point before, this is the beginning. This was our coming out party today for this. And you all are by and large believers in this already, but it takes the believers first before we begin to impact others. And those relationships are there through the policy school, especially to impact government policymakers, but also to impact the other sectors as well. So with that, let me just open it up. Thoughts about what are things that you think I should be considering in including or building, continuing this project on cross-sector leadership? Yes, Morgan.
Lisa, I believe it was, right, who had, I think, a great idea of using this network to present challenges we all face and see how this meeting of minds can help us think outside our own views to try and solve problems. Appreciating that you are running an educational institution and have a network of students, I think bringing them into that also, to, you know, have us as practitioners say, I'm facing a problem, you students, how would you tackle this? So I think with a shorter time cycle than say something like a capstone project, which presumably is part of your curriculum.
It is.
But something, you know, more sort of, even if it's just a conversation, you know, I think would probably feel satisfying to students and certainly helpful, you know, to practitioners. And would be sort of an outsourcing of you know, free intellectual capital. But then also the other way, something to contribute, your comments just now really made me think, in my work with Motive International, we've developed tools and methodologies that we typically apply to very sort of global conflict type problems, but we really think that they might be adaptable to other kinds of problems, a lot of which have been talked about in this room, whether it's, you know, domestic education issues or health issues, but we'd like to sort of pilot those tools. So, you know, that's an offer to the room. We have some really cool you know, tools and methods. Some of them are infusions of design and systems thinking. They're kind of problem diagnostic tools, and then very targeted kind of what's the first step to try and tackle this problem. We use them a lot with the special operations community and have a lot of great case studies of that, but we would love to try them out with you all on your problem. So, you know, bring your...
All names have been changed, I'm sure.
What's that?
All names have been changed.
All names have been changed, sure, yeah. So, yeah, it would be doing us a favor too to test and iterate on our own tools and methods to apply them to real cases, yeah.
That's great.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
'Cause I love the idea of keeping it very applied, like keeping one foot off the beautiful campus and in the real world. I think that's critical. And to that end, like business schools have small business development centers where they loan their students to local businesses at no cost to solve problems. You know, maybe your students might be in an interesting position to do one of two things. They might bring something from their local community they grew up in to campus and pitch it as an idea to be solved, and you pick one or two, but it's someone's hometown, where they're gonna have a whole different level of get up and go about it, and they'll be having a great story. But the other thing that they would, if you talk about what the biggest challenge we've been talking about, which is shared purpose, you know, language, all that stuff. What if their job was to come into a cross-sector leadership thing and just to find the common ground? Because students can go and interview people and say, I'm a student, I'm studying something, and they'll tell them all kinds of stuff about the competitive dynamics and all kinds of stuff. But they might be able to get to, through a student lens and a learning lens, oh, here's what we share, this shared common ground is, here's stuff that we might be able to do. People might take it better, take it better from students, but that's the missing piece, is like, what's our shared burning platform or motivation or whatever that can get past all the language? I think that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, Robert.
I don't know if I'm going to describe this very well, but it's almost like a framework for impact. So when I think about like the people in this room, you know, I almost feel like say we take an initiative someone's working on, homelessness, whatever else in a specific community, you say like, and there's the whole network of all of us which you can't engage, but some people sign up to be like on the project team. And they're the ones that are kind of working hand in hand with the leader of that, like really actively. They're in the fight, to use the special ops, you know, community. They're in the fight with that person. And there's definition. And if there was ever some donor funding to really account for the person's time, you know, that would be great. That would help create conditions for success. But then there's a ring outside of that, which is like the subject matter experts. They're not day to day on this, but they have specific expertise. It's like, we really need someone to look at this finance model we put together, and we don't know if it's, you know, can you give us your 1 hour of feedback on it? And then you have the next ring, which is like the influencers, which are not actively doing, they're not really subject matter experts, but they're like, I need to speak to someone at Coca-Cola, you know, they can open a door. You know, and then there's this kind of like affinity group, which doesn't necessarily, they're not necessarily opening doors, but they care about the issue, and if they can, and they want to kind of add momentum, they want to add advocacy. If there's something to be shared, a report that's out, they have a kind of an active network. But I feel like if we could find some type of way to like actively direct this community into a structure that would actually drive results, I think that would be helpful.
Yes.
Along those lines, I think one of the things that is really popular right now is innovation labs, be it
Yeah.
in corporations, be it in universities. I think there are so many examples of challenges that our cross-sector work lends itself to innovation design challenges, that if we make it a really collaborative learning process, we can bring some fresh lenses into issues from the students, from the faculty, from those who are on the ground, and that makes it a little bit easier
Mhm.
to go through some of those exercises as opposed to the power and privilege dynamic that they play out in some of the collaborations.
That's good. Lenny, do you
Two thoughts. One, I'd be curious what your students who were here thought. I don't know what your experience has been, but MBA applications are down, even at the top schools. And the parts of business schools that are growing are the ones that are about purpose and social impact.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
I think you've got a
And that's true
big
here.
territory.
Yeah.
And, you know, I told you this before, we had 1,000 applicants for 42 Fuse Corps fellowship positions. So there's a lot of interest in it. People want to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's good.
The second thing is just to reiterate, I really do think you're also playing into a narrative that a larger portion of the public wants to hear. They're kind of tired of the Twitter wars. And, you know, I told you a story before about Jim and Deb Fowles flying across the country and
Mhm.
telling their Our Town story. People want to hear that story, not as Pollyanna and, you know, fluff, but tell me the stories about what's actually working and what can we do to make that the norm rather than the exception. So I think if you stake that territory out, there's a lot of richness from both the student interest and then the broader opportunities to tell the story.
I'll just say on that note, you know, a book that has really helped me think more about this, going back a few years, was Bill Eggers' book, Solution Revolution. And Eggers, in that book, when he's talking about cross-sector to a degree, but also some other elements of how the sectors work together, calls the people who can do this well wave makers. And I know the students here probably hate it when I call them this, but Pepperdine is the home of the waves. And I believe that our students are wave makers, you know? And I take that identity seriously for the students that go through this program. But that's one of the reasons why I want this here, is I want our students to be known as that. And so to your point, Lenny, of connecting to a narrative, that definitely is part of how I understand our work here. Yes, in the back.
Howdy, and I'm gonna apologize in advance because my flight was late and I missed part of the day, so I'm hoping I'm not going to repeat something. But the two things I might say, just to add on to the gentleman's comment, one of the foundations that I work with is thinking about for undergrads, what it would look like to major in a subject and minor in a problem. So if you were a biology major, you would actually minor in a community problem and apply your degree, your methodology. That would be extraordinary at the graduate level. And that would also then make all of these folks walking out have the learned application and the narrative when they're walking out with a degree, and that trust.
Yeah.
And then the second one that I would just note, the capacity of government is so often, and policymakers at this point, particularly in leadership roles, is so often cut off at the knees by lack of technical expertise of some kind, whether that just be processes, understanding how technologies work, healthcare.gov being a great example. That is a unique asset that California has, that you all have being here, but having leaders who can come out and policymakers who can lead on the implementation of technology to be able to build a policy and actually understand, can we implement it? That is a huge gap right now, and it is such a niche that I could see this program filling.
You know, just so you know, and we have some of the flyers out for it, almost exactly 1 month from today, we're gonna be offering our first professional certificate on leading smart communities. The Chief Technology Officer for the City of Palo Alto is Jonathan Reichenthal, and he's a longtime friend of mine. We've created what is going to be the first professional certificate on this intersection of technology, civic engagement, and government policymaking. That you know, I love that minoring in problem solving. Essentially what you're saying though, and it's, the opportunity is already there. Michelle, you and I were talking about this briefly yesterday. The capstone is essentially what that is, right? The capstone here, as it doesn't make us unique as a policy program, but the second semester of your second year in this MPP program is your capstone semester. And one of the conversations that we've been having with the faculty is that by the time you get to the second semester of your second year, it's actually too late. We should be beginning first semester with a discussion of what your capstone is going to be. And then we certainly have a specific process in place that students go through in writing their capstone. But essentially, your capstone is your problem. And so thinking about how when a student, because all of our students who come here, they have a passion around a policy area of some sort. That having them think through right from the very beginning, you're not going to write your capstone in the first semester, but we're going to talk about it in your first semester. And that's going to intentionally set up what you're going to be doing throughout your 2 years here, even to the point of the required internship. So all of our students here have a required 240-hour internship to serve, and so how we connect the internship to this problem as well is something I'm going to be thinking about and welcome feedback on.
And that's an offer you made yesterday to the alums, is
Yeah.
that quite a few number of internships that they need to make available. So if anyone needs that kind of capacity in your organization, there's an incredible amount of talent here to leverage.
Yeah. Couple
Question
others.
on the internship, is that something you could potentially do cross school? Like you might pull some from public policy, some from business school?
Yeah, yeah. So actually, and Michelle and I were talking about this yesterday, the Leading Smart Communities certificate is the first, we have joint degrees here with law, business, and dispute resolution here on campus. But this will be the first time we've had actually a cross-school certificate offered. So I'm working with some folks in the data analytics area of the business school who I'm working with to create this professional certificate. So, yeah, Al.
One of the things that I really admired in the tech world was, and as far as the distributor world, is the way that, you know, they sell their certifications to be a Microsoft guy or a Cisco guy or an Oracle person. And those programs are expensive. And so when I had employees that would come to me to do that, I tell them to go through the free programs or go through the weekly conference call, because you're going to make a big investment as a company and you don't want these people to fall out. And we've talked about how the loans and everything.
Yeah.
They're going to make a big investment, but it really builds that tribal mentality, and that's why they make that big investment to go to Dreamforce or go to Oracle World or go get their certification and continue that program.
Yeah.
Having something that it's a weekly or a monthly, you know, like a snapshot of this, where it's engaging, or maybe you have a CEO that's actually speaking that they want to hear. You know, how they had, like Mr. Manduka said, that they're not going to listen until they hear it from someone else that's in the same situation that they respect. So having this, instead of a professor or somebody speaking, someone that
Yeah.
did that,
Yeah.
you know, and that brings them together, and then they say, oh, well, I want to be part of that. I want to go to that training, you know, I want to be there at Dreamworld or whatever.
Yeah.
But building that tribal mentality by giving them people that they can discuss with. It doesn't take a lot of time. They don't have to come here. They can do it online. You know?
Right. So, first, I cannot thank you enough for making time to be here. As I hope I've made clear, this is as much me learning from you as maybe you learn from each other. And everything that I've written down here, and maybe following conversations, whether tonight or ongoing, this is really about redefining how we educate public leaders, just to put it in the smallest, non-dramatic possible terms. And I believe we're the right school for that. And I welcome anybody else to take up this mantle. And I'll just go back to the points that Lenny made. I think that the time is right for it, but at the same time, there needs to be an institution that's taking up this mantle to say that that leadership is something about bringing people together. And, but understanding how hard that is, and not dismissing how hard that is. So this all makes me very thirsty. And we have a great reception plan just down the hill. Casa Escobar is a favorite place of ours here at the Graduate Policy School, because here in Pepperdine, it's a dry campus, and but Casa Escobar is not. And so,
There's a map in your folder.
yeah,
Make sure
if you
know
just
how to
go
get there.
down the hill until you hit PCH and make a left and head south for 1.5 miles, it's directly across the street from the Malibu Pier. We've got hors d'oeuvres and food all set out, and it's a great time to reconnect and keep the conversation going. And so, Jamie, I want to thank you for your work as we put this together. I want to thank Lisa Spinelli too, who's really been essential at helping to navigate this transition from the Presidio Institute, staying in touch with the alums of the Fellows Program, and just consoling me at times where we weren't exactly sure where this was going. So Lisa, thank you so much. And finally, I want to thank our students that have been here, that have helped. I want to thank Cheryl Covey, our Assistant Dean for Administration here, who helped make this happen. And as is always the case, the person has done so much work to put this all together. My assistant, Melissa Espinoza, is nowhere to be found. Doesn't this always happen?
She's setting up
She's
Casa
setting up-
Escobar for a family.
That's
Okay,
probably what it is.
so when you go down there, please thank Melissa. I mean, there's just no way things like this happen without her involvement. And so I'll just tell you publicly, because I don't like to do it with her present, to say how much I appreciate her. So again, thank you all.
Thank